Okay, welcome to my sound booth in my car. I was just having some thoughts and I thought I would try to capture it while it was fresh in my mind. I was thinking that one of the truly most difficult things to write about in my memoir, Believing Me, was when my stepdad, who was the narcissist in my house growing up, when he shifted from basically hating me to giving me the silent treatment, punishing me for the tiniest of behaviors, to limiting my ability to feel like kind of a normal kid living a normal life. I felt like I was on lockdown a lot of the time. When he shifted out of that place where I was almost invisible, or just visible enough to kind of let me know that I didn't matter, when I shifted from that to where suddenly he was loving me and I was special and I could breathe. It was literally like I went from this black and white version of myself into vibrant color. I existed in the world. And I felt in those moments like I had the capacity to make him move from hating me to loving me. And even though I knew that it was wrong, I knew that it was inappropriate. I knew my mom didn't know about these moments in time. It had that sort of forbidden feeling, and I hated him for it. I hated that he went from icing me out to sort of shining this light. I truly did. At the same time, I felt powerful. I felt special. And I don't think this aspect is really talked about enough. And to be honest, I felt truly ashamed to admit it. It felt like I was disgusted with myself. I think I even wrote about it as saying it felt like I was prostituting myself, that I was handing over my very being and my worth to someone that I knew was kind of batting me around like this cat and mouse game. And yet it was so much better than when I didn't exist, that I would do almost anything to stay in his good graces. I knew I could kind of get whatever I wanted in that moment, and I would do whatever I could to get it. So in these times when he was loving me and buying me gifts and taking me places and really doting on me and making me feel special, it has this sort of magical quality. And part of that is that it's in contrast to the rest of the time where I'm not seen or valued at all, right? So if you think about going from literally nothing to even just like a little bit of attention, the stakes feel high, the contrast is high, the shift is so quick that it kind of has this magical sort of feeling like you've been transported into this other reality. So I think it's really important to acknowledge how magical and how powerful that dynamic can feel, because it basically shows how intense that manipulation is and that it works, right? That it literally creates this feeling. It created this feeling in me. If you compare that magical feeling with what someone else is experiencing in terms of healthy attachment, unconditionally loving, supportive, real relationships, it feels to the person who experienced this sort of emotional manipulation, this trauma bonding, it feels to that person like you're comparing kind of mashed potatoes, like, maybe staple in your diet. Okay, mashed potatoes are fine, no big deal, to like the most delicious, decadent chocolate cake. It's like chocolate cake with sparklers on top and confetti, and it's served on a gold platter. Like, there is no comparison, okay? And this is the type of relationship that was wired into my very being as an adolescent. It was this type of interaction, these highs and lows, this trauma bonding, that formed my very basis of my worth, of what relationships are made of, what love is. And it didn't matter that I knew that it was wrong, okay? Because consciously I may have known that, but it's what I lived in. It's what I had to survive. It's the blueprint that was woven into the fabric of my being. It's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. I may have wanted to know something else, but that's not what I learned and lived. In trauma, it's what we often say, it became the familiar, right? So maybe I knew it wasn't normal, but in the familiarity, it's like that's where my tools were. I knew how to work that dynamic. I knew how to engage in that dynamic. That dynamic became my chemistry. It's what ignited that feeling of me. And, oh, I know how to navigate this. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, this is going to give me that chocolate cake, right? Who wants mashed potatoes? I wanted chocolate cake. I knew that it had to start from a place where I'm not seen, I'm not valued, I don't have much worth. So this means unavailable partners, manipulative partners, actively alcoholic partners, whatever it was. I had to start from that place with the hope of being rocketed to this other dimension. I never wanted the lows, who would choose that? Who would want that? But it was like I intuitively knew that it was a part of this larger equation. And then of course the fantasy is that eventually I'm going to get to the high where I'm seen and adored and all of that and special and powerful, and it's going to stay there. It's going to stay there because we've seen in every single fairy tale since the time that we could walk and talk that that's what happens, right? We're rescued, we're saved, we're propelled into this other place where suddenly things stay magical. And of course, that is a fairy tale. That is a fantasy. There's no way to achieve that kind of contrast without really starting from a place of not having any value. Now, this is something that always plagued me and it broke my heart. And I went to so many therapists and I was in so many 12-step programs and I really wanted to change. And I didn't necessarily see other people doing this to the extent that I was. I felt like, well, they're finding, maybe they're dating and it wasn't the one, but they're kind of landing in these healthier relationships. And I couldn't do it. And so understanding and seeing, not only understanding things like trauma reenactment and trauma bonding, but really understanding this contrast in part is what helped me to finally feel okay about myself and understand myself, that it wasn't shameful that that felt so good. Guess what? It was designed to make me feel that good. It was an intentional manipulation. And just because it was successful, it does not make me bad. My body responded exactly the way any body is meant to respond in that situation that I lived through. And then it was all that I learned. It's like, oh my gosh, it's not my fault, So today, I feel so passionate about speaking out to other people who are either living in or who have lived in this experience, maybe for as long as I did, to say there's nothing wrong with you. There is no shame in this experience, and it truly doesn't have to be this way. It is possible to break that cycle. And I'm sort of blown away that at this stage in my life, I'm finding such a new relationship to worth and even to power, and that I'm finding it by starting with me, my actual voice, and in fact, disavowing the very things that I used to live by, thinking that this was going to save me or that person was going to save me. It for so long, my salvation was out there. It was out there. Maybe one of you, someone's going to sort of fix it and help me to arrive. When in fact, my salvation, my worth, and my power lies in here, right now. Right now. And the same is true for you, right? Because anytime I surrender it and I allow someone else to give me permission or to dub me as X, Y, and Z, I've surrendered my power. When I think that if I can alter you to think that you're going to eventually turn around and choose me, I'm giving away my power. But if in this moment I decide that I can choose me, I've taken it back and I've changed my relationship to worth and power in this moment. Maybe you can even pause and see how that feels. Maybe you don't even fully believe it and you don't have to. But imagine, even if it's make-believe, that you could decide. See if a part of your body responds. Does it resonate? Does it light up? Our body tends to give us pretty powerful feedback when we're moving in both right or wrong directions. And when we stop and listen to it, it can be our compass, a new compass based on healing. And this moment is an opportunity to discover that for yourself. So I may not have been given this toolbox, this ability to relate to myself from a grounded and loving place, to know where my power lies. I may not have had this perspective growing up, but I have it now. And what I'm so surprised by, to be honest, is that even writing my own story, the pieces of this sort of shameful part of my experience and so many others, to be honest, I've been surprised how many messages I'm getting from people that I'm telling their story. I'm using language that they didn't even have to tell their own story, but this is their story. I thought my experiences were kind of unique. I thought, well, people either had it much worse or they didn't have it bad at all, and I was in this weird middle ground that kind of didn't count, And I'm surprised how many there are of us living in this space. And I'm pretty heartbroken that we've been missed. I think we've been missed and minimized and dismissed all our lives, essentially, including by those in the mental health profession who didn't really know that what we were experiencing was born of trauma, was related to trauma bonding and trauma reenactment. Some of this language they didn't even have, right? So that we have it now makes me so passionate about sharing it with other people so that you too can come to reclaim and know yourself, your true self, not the self that learned how to survive in those environments, because it is a different self altogether. And at least I can say for myself, that wasn't my true self. The part of me that learned how to feel as though she were prostituting herself, that is not my real self. And I'm finally finding out who she is. And it's really my greatest hope that anyone else who has ever felt the shame of that, I want you to know that you make sense. You make sense. And you don't have to keep living like that anymore. Goodness sakes. I would love to hear if you feel comfortable sharing in the comments if you identify with any of this, what parts you identify with, what it was like for you, what it's like on the other side if you have found one. My name is Dr. Ingrid Clayton. I am a clinical psychologist, a trauma therapist, and most importantly, I'm a trauma survivor who is living every day to try and do things differently, to step into a new relationship to myself, for me, for my son, for my family, and in the hope of helping you to do the same. I'm the author of a memoir, Believing Me, Healing from Narcissistic Abuse and Complex Trauma. If you relate to anything I've shared here today, I suspect you will find a lot of your own story reflected in mine, and I look forward to connecting with you here on YouTube again. Subscribe and share, and we'll keep walking this walk together.